So we are here to talk, and I think, you know, people have been connecting over Facebook and posting things and reading things, but it's so important to have the actual conversation with each other around what's going on, because we have a lot of thoughts and feelings. And so it's easy right now to feel uncertain, at times isolated, at times overwhelmed. I know that I have a lot of ups and downs in this situation of being at home and trying to make learning meaningful for my students. So I want to talk about social emotional learning, or SEL, for both you and your students. And you can go to the next slide. There we go. So what I want to do, our objectives here are to help you understand exactly what SEL is and how to meaningfully engage in that, and reflect on how we can improve our well-being, because we must work on ourselves first before we can go forward and be there for our students and our families, and then explore some strategies that help us leverage SEL. That's okay, go to the next slide. So a really important question, of course, is how are we doing? How is everybody doing here, really honestly? And we invite you to share in the chat box. How have you been feeling? You can use feeling words. And what have you been thinking? And what's the situation with your own well-being? So go ahead and you can type in the chat box, and I'll just read out some of the comments that people are having. I know, like I mentioned, I've had a lot of ups and downs, big roller coasters. So it's a difficult situation. All right, and I get, if you would like to put some comments in the chat box, go for it. There's no right or wrong answer here. How has your personal well-being been impacted by school closures and the pandemic? What are you thinking about? How are you feeling? I think that I have good days and bad days. It's also, I have my own children here at home with me, and they have good days and bad days, and they sometimes impact how I'm doing. I'm worrying constantly about my families and my students. I'm really trying to track who's participating in our online learning so that I can look for patterns around who's missing or who's present. I do a lot of work with my students trying to figure out how they're feeling. And if they're not showing up for online learning, I'm reaching out with phone calls and even visits to make sure that they're doing okay. All right. All right, we can go on to the next slide. That's no problem. All right, so it's important to think about well-being, because well-being impacts ourselves and those around us. When we have a positive impact on our well-being, it can improve our health. And I see someone feels disconnected. Yes, it's really easy to feel disconnected right now. So that wellness, sometimes we have to work on it completely by ourselves, and we don't know how to do that sometimes. But working on that well-being will impact the health and well-being of those around us, and it can help us bond and get rid of that disconnection feeling. And then it can also help us engage with social issues and be a helper in society, which is something that we also want to try and do at this time as well, because so many have so many needs right now. Yeah, I'm hearing feeling isolated and disconnected. So how do we battle that isolation, right? Okay, good. I see someone's engaging in online courses. I'm actually doing that as well. All right, so this, what we're going to talk about then is how SEL can support our well-being. You're going to learn that there's 5 competencies in the realm of social emotional learning, and I'm going to take you through them. I like to include this tweet here. This is someone on Twitter saying, you're not working from home, you're at home during a crisis trying to work. What we have to remember is that we didn't all of a sudden decide to embrace online learning or try something new or do a grand experiment about staying home. We're being forced to stay in our homes due to a global emergency. And the emotions around that are much different than if we had decided to do something, or if we had decided to homeschool our students or decided to get started with online learning. So I think we have to really think about that and really honestly embrace the difficulty in what we're doing and how that's going to impact us, okay? So I thought that's a good jumping off point. You can go to the next slide. So right here now, this is a way to help us understand social emotional learning. And CASEL is a group, CASEL stands for the Collaborative for Academic and Social Emotional Learning. Their website is casel.org. And they have this visual here, this wheel that kind of sums up social emotional learning in just one visual, and I just love it. And in that visual, you can see there are 5 different ideas, 5 competencies: self-awareness, self-management, responsible decision-making, relationship skills, and social awareness. And so once you understand those 5 things, then you can really start to understand what social emotional learning is and how to embrace it in what you're doing. And a big core tenet of my teaching and my writing and my beliefs is that if we want to help our students engage in social emotional learning, we have to engage in social emotional learning ourselves in a very deep and honest way so that it can authentically, get out to and impact our students. So that wheel has kind of been burned into my brain. It's what I think about all the time in the classroom, and we'll go through each competency. Yep, that's fine. The first one we're going to talk about is self-awareness, and Castle defines that as accurately recognizing one's emotions and thoughts and their influence on behavior. It includes accurately assessing one's strengths and limitations and possessing a well-grounded sense of confidence and optimism. That comes right from their website. And I think the big ideas here are, particularly right now, understanding if you are optimistic or pessimistic, and understanding what you can and cannot control. And the way to do that is to have just a really honest conversation with yourself about this. And if we have trouble being optimistic or seeing the good side of things, we know that we're going to struggle in a situation like this. So I just have a few little visuals here that kind of get at the heart of this. The first one says, I will face whatever comes today with a positive attitude. We can resolve to do that. We can make plans to do that. We can state our intention to do that. And then when things don't go so well, look at the next box. It says looking for something positive in each day can help us when we have a difficult day or a difficult situation, just take something good out of it. And currently that's what we're doing at our dinner table each night. My husband and our 2 kids and I, we're trying to share something that we're grateful for and something positive about the day, even if it was like the worst day ever, just so we can kind of find the positivity in it. And then the next box is all about, giving yourself permission to fail at this, and that's going to happen, and forgive yourself and move on. So every day is a new beginning. Take a deep breath, smile, and start again. That's what we want to do when the day just goes terribly and we really have trouble finding anything positive or succeeding and doing what we want to do. So that's self-awareness in a nutshell during COVID-19. You can go to the next slide. All right, next competency is self-management. Castle defines this as the ability to regulate one's emotions, thoughts, and behaviors effectively in different situations. This includes managing stress, controlling impulses, motivating oneself, and setting and working toward achieving personal and academic goals. So once you're aware of what your strengths and weaknesses are, your limitations and your emotions, how do you manage them? So we want to identify our emotions and notice our stress level. A really great way to do that is through I statements. I feel. Even what some of you all were putting in the chat box really resonates here. I feel isolated and I feel lonely. I feel frustrated. I feel helpless. Just acknowledging those emotions, there's a lot of power in that. I think we have to acknowledge and face all of our very difficult emotions and not pretend that everything's okay, because it's really not. And in terms of managing our emotions, we want to know what our triggers are and have responses ready, and potentially try and avoid situations where, it's very likely you might see some more difficult emotions. And as we're thinking about this for ourselves, think about our students are trying to do this very same thing as well, even though they may be much younger and have difficult situations at home. They're going to be trying to engage in this as well. And you can go to the next slide. So I think a nice place to focus right now during COVID-19 is just understanding the difference between what we can control and what we can't control, and then learning to focus on the things we can control. So the outer part of the slide is what we can't control. We cannot control what other people are doing. We cannot control what's being said on the news. We can't control if our neighbors or friends are social distancing. We have no idea how long this will last. That's a very hard part of what's going on right now. And we can't control how others react. But in the inner circle there, you can control your attitude, your own social distancing, turning on and off the news. I tend to look at the news in the morning for just a little bit, and then again in the late afternoon or evening, and I keep it off during most of the day, because after a while I realize there's nothing really new on the news for me, and it can bring about those feelings of anxiety or even depression to hear about the situation at hand. We can limit our social media. We can do our best to find fun things to do at home. Someone was mentioning that they're doing an online course, and I'm doing that as well. There's a website called Coursera.org, Coursera.org, and they have tons of free courses. I'm taking one right now on the science of happiness, and I'm enjoying that quite a bit, and that takes my mind off the other things. All right, you can go to the next slide. Social awareness, that's our third competency. Castle defines social awareness as the ability to take the perspective of and empathize with others from diverse backgrounds and cultures, to understand social and ethical norms for behavior, and to recognize family, school, and community resources and supports. That comes right from Castle's website. And the big idea here is all about empathy. And right now, it's really important to have empathy for those around us. I think we need to have empathy for ourselves, right? Because we've got to kind of really be forgiving and compassionate and kind with everything that's going on. And some questions here to think about is, you know, what are people feeling? What do people need? And that could include family members or students or families or your peers. How can I help them? What is going on with my partner or spouse? What kind of empathy do they need? My kids, any extended family and relatives, students and families, school leadership and community. I mean, I have a lot of empathy for our education leaders who are trying to figure out the situation we're in. Of course, for my students and families, my father lives alone. He's 78 years old, and I am empathetic to his situation of isolation as well as fear of going out of his house. So trying to help out with everybody. My kids are teenagers, and when you're a teenager, everything is about your friends and your social life. So having to be at home all the time is really difficult for them. So I'm trying to be empathetic to as many people as I can. This slide here helps us to take a look at how we can feed the community by doing different things. Can you support? Can you connect? Can you educate, innovate, and expand? And I think a lot of what's going to be happening in the future is we're going to have to innovate how to do school and do a lot of things in a new reality. Personally, I think being here, all of us, we are connecting right now, and that's a very important thing to do. This is also, this webinar series is a source of support for educators. And anyone who's sharing information and knowledge is educating. So I think that these are great ideas to think about. If you can look at this slide and think of one or two things that you're good at, then you can use your tools to support others in the interest of social awareness. You can go to the next slide. All right, also relationship skills are important right now. The ability to establish and maintain healthy and rewarding relationships with diverse individuals and groups. It includes communicating clearly, listening actively, cooperating, resisting inappropriate social pressure, negotiating conflict constructively, and seeking and offering help when needed. So right now we are trying to maintain positive relationships with all of our various groups that we come in contact with. And to do that, I feel like all the other competencies build up to strong relationship skills. We have to engage in self-management and emotional regulation. We have to work on our communication skills, and we have to have empathy right now for everyone. We are also able to create new relationships. There's probably new ways we can reach out to the community to be a helper now that we may not have thought about before, helping people who can't get out or people in need. And we can leverage existing relationships for good. I think right here today, all of us being here, all of us have a relationship around wanting to create positive change in education spaces, particularly supporting students from low-cost schools. So this is a great example of us using our relationship skills for something good. And you can go to the next slide. Also, oh, I'm sorry, this one should actually say the top, responsible decision-making. That's my error. The fifth competency is responsible decision-making, the ability to make constructive and respectful choices about personal behavior and social interactions based on the consideration of ethical standards, safety concerns, social norms, and the realistic evaluation of consequences of various actions and the well-being of self and others. So right now, the safety concerns and the social norms, that means staying in, which is contrary to our very nature as human beings, where we crave connection and interaction with people. And the big ideas here are stop, think, and decide. What should we do? I remember when school first closed, the next day, it was a Saturday, and my husband's like, well, let's go out and maybe we can shop for a few things and stock up on some books. And then all of a sudden we realized, no, we can't go out. School is closed because of this emergency. We can't just go out and go shopping or do the things that we usually do. And the visuals here just talk about flattening that curve. You know, in the United States, we've been in isolation now for about more than 50 days, and the curve is flattening, although we still have a very serious situation, and over 71,000 people have died in the United States so far. So now is the time where we can't change our behavior. We have to stay the course, and as with so many places around the world. Go ahead. All right, so I love this graphic. This graphic can help us take stock of where we are. So the person who created this says there's 3 zones you can be in. You can be in a fear zone, a learning zone, or a growth zone. And personally, I am trying to be in that growth zone as much as possible. But what I love about this graphic is that it helps me to understand how I actually go in and out of these zones every day. So I might have a day where I'm completely in the fear zone. I'm just having a terrible day and I'm thinking of what's the worst thing that could happen. And that's really hard. And then the next day I might wake up and be in the growth zone. I think right now we're all in the growth zone because we're thinking about others and how we can be a help. Sometimes we go in and out of these zones hourly. So it's okay to do that. It's okay that that's happening. This just helps you understand it a little bit better. And again, I think right now, just by virtue of being here, we're all in the learning zone or the growth zone. All right, go ahead. This just helps create more self-awareness. Okay, so healthy habits can help us cope with what's going on. Simple things, washing our hands, moderate our news intake if you're working from home, create a calming space for yourself if you can, practice self-care, exercise, meditation, and ask friends and family for help if you need it. Just simple guidelines. And you can go to the next slide. And then here is just when anxiety does show up and you do have a very tough time, what can you do? What can you do to change those thoughts going on in your head? Create something, writing, listening to music, finding a distraction, going for a walk, taking a breath, those kinds of things. So just a simple group of ideas to help you. And I recently shared this with my families in my classroom because I know some of the kids have been having anxiety and fears at night or worrying about if family members are going to get sick. And so I did share this with families as well. And you can go to the next one. Thank you. Mindful breathing can help us cope. Box breathing is a strategy where you breathe for 4 seconds and you visualize a box while you do it. And it just works like this. You breathe in for 4, hold it for 4, breathe out, and hold it for 4. And this just helps slow things down. And I've used this strategy in my classroom a lot. And what I do is I have the kids take their finger and actually trace a square in the air while they're breathing around it. And the other day with my class, we were doing a video call and we just did this 5 times as a class together. And it just kind of like slowed things down. So when we start to get anxious or nervous or worried, we can engage in mindful breathing, and that can help with our self-management. All right, you can go to the next slide. All right, and then the next question is, how can we support our learners? Okay, and these are just pictures of friends in Nigeria. What we want to do is think about what's going on with our learners. And I know that a lot of you are working with students from low-cost schools in rural areas. It may be difficult to reach the students and engage them in learning. So I'm just going to share some information from a great article I read that really focuses on their emotional well-being. And you can go to the next slide. Okay, so what this article finds is that the emotional state of students is going down as this lockdown continues on, and that really is going to put kids who are at risk perhaps at even a greater risk. Okay, so initially there was a little bit of celebration when schools closed, maybe like, yay, school's closed, I don't have to go to school. And now that we're in this for many, many weeks, there's a decline in students' self-reported emotional well-being. And this data is based on students who are able to report. So what we have to understand, and I think this is on the next slide, is that the kids who can't report are probably even more at risk and maybe even having more significant impacts to their emotional well-being. Yeah, so these trends omit disengaged students, or those who don't have technology access and may be struggling the most. And then we get to this point where we think, okay, so what can we do for these students? And this may be the situation that many of you find yourselves in. And you can go to the next slide. So they just have a set of ideas that come out of here of what can we do. So whether it's virtually or physically, what you want to do is create, oh, can you just go back one? We want to, can you go back one slide, please? Oh, I'm sorry. Well, I'll just continue talking on. There was a slide there that said, what we want to do is we want to create a safe space for students to check in with their emotions and allow them to express negative emotions. Okay, so if they're feeling scared, nervous, mad, angry, sad, you want to have a space for them to check in. Now, if you're working with students that don't have access to technology, the primary vehicle for check-in, I'm not sure, would that be a phone call? Would that be a text message using a cell phone, mobile phone? Would that be something via WhatsApp, maybe a group where you can have a check-in? Whatever that looks like, have that safe space for the kids so that they can check in, and even if they're not doing well, they are okay to say that in that safe space. Oh, thanks so much for getting the slides back up. And actually go back, let's see. Oh, I think one more forward, let's say. One more, and then I think just one more. There we go. So thank you so much. Okay, so we want to create that space for students to share their emotions, ideally as part of a consistent routine. And what they've seen is that a quick daily check-in works well. Other ideas include journaling, video reflections, or live check-ins via phone or video. We have a discussion board where we have online learning happening, and kids, there's a question and they can answer the question. So with you all, figuring out what that looks like is going to be a consideration. I believe mobile phones may be a primary way tool for learning right now. So determining what that can look like with a group chat, a text message, a phone call, whatever it is, that will help you gauge your students' emotional well-being right now. Okay, and you can go to the next slide. And then once you start doing that, once that's a regular practice, pay attention to student responses and the tone of any written work. Look for trends and shifts, and provide timely feedback to make sure students don't get lost due to a time lag. As a best practice, we've seen teachers respond to students 2 to 3 times per week when they're reflecting daily. I'll give you an example of this. I recently had a little girl in my class. She just decided she did not want to do video calls anymore, Zoom. She has 3 siblings, and she said, I don't like to do the video calls. Do I have to come on? I said, no, of course not. And so that was a shift in the trend of what she was doing. However, she was still coming on and being engaged in her work, and her responses didn't seem to indicate any problems. So I realized that wasn't a problem. It was just a change in the way she was interacting with the class. If she had gone off the video calls and then totally stopped doing her work, I would have been concerned and would have reached out with a phone call or perhaps a visit. All right, and you can go to the next slide. All right, and then ideas to support that well-being: identify students who are entirely disengaged and creatively communicate with them or their caretakers to better understand their situation. So instead of focusing on truancy or academic work, consider checking in with them on their emotional well-being to start asking them to name an emotion while normalizing difficult emotions. And with this, also communicating with the family. How are you doing as a family? Do you need anything? Are people taking advantage of any social supports that may be available? That kind of thing. And if, kids are coming up with these difficult emotions on a consistent basis, again, that's okay. Thank you, for sharing your emotions. And now that we are in these, dealing with these difficult emotions, what can we do about it? All right, then you can go to the next one. And I think the next slide just has another option for, yes, there we go. Another option for kids to track their emotions. So you can see in the visual, they've got days of the week. How are you feeling? Circle 1, and there's just little emojis there with different expressions on them. I think emojis are great because they're the universal language for everyone communicating how they're feeling. And then there's a focus question here, and then a reflection. So if you start to collect this information from kids on a regular basis, you can figure out what's going on. If there's a change midweek, you might know something has happened in a family, or there might be an additional difficulty. I heard about a family where a relative came down with COVID-19, so that kind of put everybody into a tailspin temporarily. And so things, you know, as they do with all of us, things can go up and down. And again, that emotional check-in piece is key. If the kids aren't in a great place in terms of their social emotional health, academic learning will be quite difficult. So in my opinion, that's what we should be focusing on first and foremost right now while we figure out the academics that we can engage in. I teach in a public school system, and our orders right now are not to teach new material. Our goal is to engage kids in learning so they don't lose anything, but to try and teach new material online in an online platform is too tricky, too demanding, not equitable for kids who need support. And I can never even get my whole class on a video chat at the same time. I've never once done that in the past 6 weeks. So with what families are going through, we're just trying to reduce attrition and loss of learning, keeping going with practice of known learning and existing learning from throughout the school year. And it's working pretty well. I think that may be my last slide. Oh, no, wait, I think I have one more. Okay, yeah, here's another one. These are social emotional learning resources. If you click on the links, and you're welcome to distribute the slides to everyone, you're gonna see ideas for social emotional learning for different ages of students, grades K to 2, 3 to 5, middle school and high school. And there's different types of activities that focus on gratitude, self-awareness, kindness, social awareness, those kinds of things. And those can be great ways to engage your students as well. So that's a resource for you in learning. And then here is a collection I've pulled together of self-care resources for educators, because we must start with ourselves if we're going to be there for our students. And if you click that link, there's articles, there's webinars, there's physical activity ideas, mindfulness resources, you know, some games, things like that, motivating videos of teachers, just things there for you. And I urge everyone to really take care of yourself as well as you can during this time, so that you can push your well self out to the others who need you. And that's really it. That's my presentation. And I'll take any questions in the chat box or any thoughts. And there's my contact information there. And I am definitely responsive when people contact me from all around the world. So please reach out to me if you do have any questions, and I can.
Thank you so much, Wendy. That was a phenomenal presentation. Thank you, everyone. We'll be taking questions at the end, but Wendy, there was something you said at the end of your session. I mean, of your
Yeah.
presentation about you said we must start with ourselves. If we must be there for our students, for our learners, which I think is very, very important. This is a time where everybody is you know, in some kind of states right now, and you know, it's difficult for everyone. But for teachers to even be able to think about their students, now they have to be able to first think about themselves and think about their well-being as well. I'm sure we'll definitely come back to you with more questions. So please, if you have any questions for Wendy, please put them down in the chat board. But our partners, I'm just going to give you guys just 5 minutes to rush through your presentations, and then we can take the questions. I think we've taken quite a lot of time, and we don't want to keep our participants waiting for too long. So I'm going to be bringing on Kayode to make his presentation.
Okay, thank you very much, Dami. Good evening, everyone. I hope you can all hear me. Can you hear me?
I believe so.
Okay, awesome. Right. So thank you so much for the introduction. And I think for me, it's always a pleasure to learn from Wendy every time we get to connect with one another. Right. So Wendy, thank you so much for your presentation, which is absolutely phenomenal. And I think that is just like a great pathway to lead me into my own session. I mean, I have just 5 minutes, but I'll try my best. So this session is titled Fostering Local and Global Communities of Practice During the Lockdown. And for me, I think that this is a very, very important thing that educators need to know about. And I'm so glad that Wendy has really touched, because I would say Wendy has said a whole lot about my presentation already, so I would not just have to duplicate her words. But I think that when this session actually focused on our social and emotional well-being as teachers and learners, and this is very, very essential if we must actually foster local and global connections. Because I believe that if you as an individual are not well-rounded, you're not well-balanced, you will not be able to even connect with someone close to you, not to talk of building a relationship with them, and not to talk of even having a thriving community around yourselves. So, I mean, the first slide here says, how can we lean into our local communities for support during these times of isolation? So these slides are actually extracted from a presentation I made in conjunction with Empathic around 2 weeks ago. So the question is just around how can we continue to build out a shared body of knowledge and stay connected. So it's about how teachers can actually build themselves up, be socially and emotionally balanced, and then transcend that into creating local communities around themselves. Please let me have the next slide, Dami. All right, so, and how can we do this? I mean, I'm just here to share some tips that teachers can actually, go through and take to actually build these communities around themselves. We've already learned up from Wendy, ideas on how we can be well balanced as individuals. Now, how do we connect with one another? Now, this is an amazing idea here. So, during this period where there's a school closure, where there's lockdown everywhere, I think it is a time when we as educators need to start looking inward. Is there an amazing individual or educator, parent or caregiver that we know in our community that we would like to learn from? For example, me, I always mention a guy, his name is Eitai Ogumola. I've always wanted to learn entrepreneurship from him because he's like a big time entrepreneur, and the guy has, I love the way he thinks strategically. So I really wanted to learn from him. So during this lockdown period, because of the opportunity of time that I have at my hand, I was able to connect with him and learn a whole lot from him. And I got a lot of ideas on how we can scale Schoolinka and make it better and better and better. So this is a call to you as educators. Is there someone you look up to within your community that you can connect to at this period and then learn from? Now is the time for you to do that. Next slide, please. All right, so as well, apart from connecting with people, right, that you actually respect, there is also an idea of you building virtual communities for shared learning experiences. And I'll just quickly share the Schoolinka story here. Recently, after when COVID lockdown started in Nigeria, we kicked out our shared learning experience calls, and then we've had we've had like 3 calls now presently, in our shared learning community where teachers gather together to learn from their shared experiences. And then also they get to learn about pedagogy and other ways. The recent call we had was how they can actually make money, extra income through remote jobs. So it is time right now as educators for us to think of how we can bring ourselves together to build virtual communities. We know that, yes, there's a practice of social distancing, but how are we leveraging communities such as WhatsApp, Telegram to actually work with one another, discuss with one another, and share with one another? So this is the time for us to be thinking about that, building communities using virtual tools and sharing our experiences in order to make ourselves better. I believe that no man is an island of knowledge. We can always speak out something from other people once we are able to create virtual communities, right? So other ways by which we can actually share support and also build our local communities actually through small acts of kindness. For me, I feel like if you lend a helping hand to someone next to you, you're not just doing it to that person, you're doing it to yourself. Because there's this feeling that comes after doing good. You're better and then you're well, emotional, because it brings hope for you, positivity for you. So it's time for us as educators to actually start thinking of small acts of kindness. And something we are trying to do currently now is even how we can raise funds to help teachers that are in schools that are not paying salaries currently, schools that are completely shut down, learning is not happening. How can we reach out to them? So as educator communities, we can start thinking of those ideas, lending our expertise. For example, we can have a Facebook group where I have seen such like that. Where parents can come with questions on mathematics for their students or for their children at home that they cannot solve. They come there, post those questions, and we as educators, because of the free time we have at our hand, we can go there to actually lend our expertise to ensure that learning keeps going on for these children, even those that don't have teachers to teach them during this period. So we can lend our expertise. It's something that we know. Let us share this knowledge and let people know. Then volunteering, we should start thinking about volunteering and also donating. If there's anything, if we have excess resources, now is the time to lend a helping hand, extend the chain of humanity to everybody out there. Next slide, please. All right, so now this is, I've just shared ideas on how we can actually build local communities around ourselves. Now I'm now looking at how we can transcend, escalate this to building global solidarity. Now, it's not enough for us to connect within our local communities. We need to actually bring this to the global stage. And this is something, for example, this call that is happening right now. We can have teachers from Uganda join, teachers from United Kingdom join. For example, in our course that we've hosted the past weeks, we've had people from other countries join, from Kenya join the course. I mean, just to learn. So now is the time for us to actually carry this local community and create a linkage with other people across the world and build global solidarity as educators. Can I have the next slide? I know my 5 minutes will soon be up, if it's not up yet. So what are the benefits of being globally informed? How can we extend our local connections and global connections through experiences that are meaningful and actionable? Next slide. So educators can actually be frontline advocates for a more interconnected world. I mean, for me, okay, so in 2018, I joined the Teach SDGs movement. And what we are doing at Teach SDGs is to actually spread the knowledge of sustainable development goals across the K-12 classrooms around the world. On this project, we as educators are seeing ourselves as SDG champions, are seeing ourselves as people who are advocating for a more sustainable world. Same can actually happen right now. It is time for us as educators to come to the forefront of fighting for a more interconnected world. We can see what is happening. A lot of countries blaming themselves for the impact of COVID-19 on countries. I mean, people throwing banters up and down, presidents of nations talking to one another. This is because there's a whole lot of huge divide between these countries. Now more than ever, we need a very interconnected world. We need our young learners to start learning from one another so that they can end up building a generation that will think about the world first before they think about themselves. So parents as well, if you're a parent on this call, this is the time for you to start creating, environments that would make global learning thrive. So also, one of the benefits that come from actually building global communities is that you experience unique contexts that help you make well-informed decisions. I've been able to make well-informed decisions by learning other contexts, learning from other people's perspectives. I mean, I've learned from someone in Spain before to actually improve on what I'm doing in Nigeria. So there's, platform for you to actually learn from one another. Next slide. All right, so there's also the opportunity for cross-border sharing of ideas, resources, tools, and pedagogy. On our call, we learned a lot about some tools that can be used. For example, on one of our calls, that's when I learned about how to use Microsoft Forms to actually create online quizzes for students and even awarding them certificates, all automated. If it's not that call happened, I might not have learned that very soon. So, but because we're able to build those virtual communities that are global in nature, there's a platform for cross-border sharing of ideas, resources, tools, and pedagogy. Next slide.
Great.
I will rush off. Yes, so these are actually resources for you to look at how you can join global communities of practices. We have Participate, Teach SDGs, we have thought leadership platforms where you can actually read. So once you click on this link, I'm so sure you have access to the slides. Once you click on this link, you'll be able to join this community. So thank you so much. I know I've done more than 5 minutes.
Thank you.
I had to rush through. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you for your presentation. I just want you to think about this particular question, but you can answer it later, but not right now. I know you've spent the last couple of years working with teachers, trying to prepare them for the demands of the current market. So I just want you to think about this. I know a lot of teachers in here would definitely want an answer to this. How can the teachers develop themselves, to fit into the demands of the current, world during COVID and post-COVID? How can they, become relevant, despite the fact that a lot of, schools are down, a lot of teachers are, out of jobs? What can they do to, get out of that situation? So please think about that. I will come back to you during the questions. Thank you very much. So without further ado, Mrs. Temi Osho, please, over to you. Are you there? Hello?
Hello, yeah. Can you hear me? Good evening, everybody.
Yes, please.
Yeah. So thank you so much, Wendy, Kaide. Amazing presentation. Thank you so much. My name is Temlayo Esho. Yeah, right. And today we want to be talking about teachers, students, mental and emotional health. It's not news again that we are in this time, coronavirus and all of that. And a lot of things have been going on with teachers, educationists, educators all around the world. And there are just three things I would want us to focus on concerning our mental health. Wendy has talked a lot about emotional health. And so there are three pieces that when we do these three pieces, when we combine them together, they make a whole piece and it will keep us well during this period. And the first thing is to keep things in perspective. Like, so right now, there are a lot of things that are probably going on through your head. And am I going to get my job at the end of this? When is this going to end? Will I be alive? Will I be well at the end of this period? Focusing on just a piece of the problem would make it bigger than it seems. So why not just focus on everything? The first thing I want you to all remember is you're still an educator. The fact that you're not going out in the morning and coming back in the evening, as you know, before the coronavirus time, does not mean you're stopped being an educator. So what you have to do, focus on the important role that we as educators we have, and that is to be the sense of connection between the students and the school, to be that person that helps the kids achieve their fullest potentials. And how do we do that? And so we are now in I'm going to be using the Nigeria concept, right? Because most of us are working with low cost communities, and most of them can connect through Zoom and all of that. So let us, please, the first slide, please. Thank you, Dami. And most of us can't, connect with our kids with Zoom and all of that. So I want us to focus on the little things we can do. Some of us have the phone numbers of these kids and their parents. Let us reach out to them and let us remember that we do not focus on the things that we cannot control, but we focus on the things that we can control and keep the big things big and the little things little. The big things are, what can I do now? I cannot fix the international situation, but I can fix the situation with the kid that I can reach out to. I can fix the situation with, I can check on the kid. I can check on his or her well-being and keep he or she going. Yeah, and and if you find yourself, worrying a lot, one thing that I would suggest is have a time for worry. Yes, I actually found that recently the psychologists agree that we need to find time to worry. So you can just schedule about an hour a day and say, okay, this time I'm going to worry, and then you write down all your worries. I'm worried my job will not be there at the end of this coronavirus. I worry that my family might be infected. I worry about finances. I worry about my kid. I worry about Salako. I worry about this. Write everything down. Then write out the things that support your worry and the things that would make your worry, like facts that will negate your worries. And when you do this, you find out that the worry, they are not bouncing in your head anymore, but they are now concrete. And so you can negate it. Oh, this is not so big and this is so little. Doing that would help minimize stress and all of that. And the second piece I want us to actually hold on to is routine. During this time, one word I tell people: get up and get dressed. Don't allow yourself to stay on the bed for too long because you're not going out, or because we are forced to stay in. Does not actually mean we shouldn't have routine. Have routine. It will help you maintain your physical wellness and also your emotional wellness, because you're passing a message across to your brain that you're still alive, you're still moving on. It will prevent you from getting into depression. It will prevent you from getting into those moods where you're sad, you're worrying too much. So when you get into routine, have a regular time for eating, regular time for moving out, just 5 minutes walk, 10 minutes walk, 10 minutes run, walking down and up the stairs. Have a routine, establish a routine. And if you have children, talk to them about how the day will work and what they're to do. Children thrive on routine. Yeah, and the third thing is maintaining social connection. So Wendy and Akayode, they've said a lot about social connections, and I'll just say that as to round up this, that even though we are all isolated, you see the picture in the middle, yeah, we're all isolated. Somehow we can still connect. And during this time, think about who energizes you and reach out to them for a conversation. Limit the time with those who don't energize you. Be bold enough to say, I'm sorry, but you keep spreading out, you keep giving me news, fake news or negative news, and I'm just going to reduce my time with you. And if you can't tell the person that, you can actually just miss the conversation, especially if it's on WhatsApp and all of that. But make sure that you're connected to people that energize you, connect to community of educators, connect to your family, and stay connected to people that would support you and keep you moving. And also be a source of support to people. Make it a point of duty to support the kids that that we are not able to see right now. Remember that as teachers, we thrive on connections. And so maintain your social connections through Zoom, WhatsApp, Facebook, phone calls. And I'm sure that with these 3 keys, we'll be able to stay well and stay safe.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. There was something that you actually said that really got me, a bit cracking. You said, no matter the situation, get up and get dressed. And I can always, I think I'm not mixing words when I say this too shall pass. So when this is all gone, who will you be at that point? Would you have forgotten who you are? Or would you be ready to take on the challenge and get moving again? So thank you very much for that presentation, Mrs. Temilaya Shaw. Now, without further ado, please over to you, Mrs. Babatunde Folashade.
Thank you, Dami. Hello, can you hear me?
Yeah, sure.
All right, good evening, everyone. So thank you, Dami, for this opportunity. So the previous speakers they've spoken about mental health, building connection. And so I'm coming in from the angle of nutritional well-being and also child protection. And so we realized that since this COVID-19 has started, so many people have lost their jobs. Children are stuck with parents who don't even have a source of income or maybe a source of feeding their families. That means the next slide, please. Of feeding their families. And so you realize that food security is really on the rise. People are hungry. There's shortage of food. There is shortage of cash. Recently during the COVID-19 thing, we found out that we were having more cases of robbery, people going to stores to steal just because they need to feed themselves and their family. And then the price of food commodity in the market is just way too high. And so looking at people in the low income community, we begin to think that how do they, end up, how would they get to feed themselves to be fine? The truth is that for someone to be able to maintain connection, to be able to ensure that he or she has good mental health, they need to have good nutritional status first, because the nutritional status is more like the basis for every other aspect of their life. When someone is not feeling well, when you're malnourished, you're hungry, there's some things that you can't just begin to think about. And so nutrition is so important at this stage. And so we realize that for poor households, the experience is really terrible for them at this time. And pre-COVID, we had about 144 million children who were stunted. And so I've been thinking, we need to do another research after COVID and see, the rate of malnutrition that has really gone. And to realize that even kids are the most vulnerable at this time, especially kids in low-income community where their parents don't even have a source of livelihood anymore, or they can't even afford to buy this food. So we realize that malnutrition is really robbing children of their futures, and thanks to COVID, it's even becoming worse. And we need to think of the impact of malnutrition on kids' ability to learn, because here we're educators, and these are the kids that come into our classes. And post-COVID, you still find these kids in your classes, and then you want them to be able to learn well and achieve proper education. And so you realize that kids who are stunted, when you say a child is stunted, it means that the child has a low height for weight, and that's also as a result of not feeding, having poor nutrition in childhood. Such kids don't get to develop their brain. They don't have optimal brain development at the end of the day. And so this is the brain that's also going to help them learn in class. And so whatever intervention you're bringing, I like to say this, is that if a child is supposed to grow optimally, for maybe the brain development is supposed to be 100%, and because of malnutrition, that child is only able to grow 50%, for example. That means what you can only work on in your classroom is that 50%. You can only optimize that 50%. And so you find out that these kids face learning difficulty in school, and also they face barrier in trying to participate in their community. And so, so that's on nutrition. So quickly going to child protection. It's funny that at this time where we had the COVID-19 lockdown, we had more a rise in the cases of child abuse, and this is usually due to the movement of restriction, loss of income. People are frustrated, no job, they're isolated, they can't move about, overcrowding in some houses where you don't even have everyone together before. Now the father, the mother, and all the kids are all together at the same time, and so frustration will set in, and then kids get exposed to different kind of abuses. And so you find out that the situation is even more aggravated because the kids don't even have access to school, their school friends. Or in normal day, they would have gone to school and then just come back home. They don't have teachers who they can even talk to, or social worker, or the safe space where they can, get to spend more time before even going back home, especially those that are from dysfunctional homes. And so it seems like after COVID, we're going to be having more cases of child labor, child marriage, and then child trafficking to deal with. And so the question I like to ask is that how do you help a child who is hungry, malnourished, ill, and then abused, all in this child? How do you help that child to learn well in class? And so sometimes it goes more than just trying to teach your child the basic literacy, the basic numeracy, and then just helping he or she learn all those things. You need to ensure that your child is in a good state of health. And so nutrition really plays a major role here. And so we need to think about it, how pre-COVID now, they are not in school, and but post-COVID, they're coming back to your classroom. How do you ensure? Because a lot of these kids will be coming back to your class hungry, malnourished, even ill, and then many of them are already abused, and different form of abuse that we know, the sexual, the physical abuse, and so many of these that, makes the state of that child very, very pitiable. So just saying what the impact of child nutrition and child, because we've been talking about social and emotional learning. And so a child who has poor nutrition and then a child who is also abused would lack the energy and the focus to learn well in class, low cognitive and social emotional skills. So a child who doesn't even have the skill will find it in a way challenging to even learn the social and emotional learning you're trying to teach them in the class. And so they also have poorer skills, and then they are less able to manage their emotions because of the things they face at home and what they often observe in the house, especially those from homes that are violent. Then many of these kids also end up having lower self-esteem, aggressive behavior. We've seen their parents, beat their moms or maybe fight their neighbors, and so many of these things. And at the end of the day, they are even unable to build positive relationship with their kids, with their friends around the house. And so both poor nutrition and child abuse have negative impact on child's emotional responses, their reaction to stress, and in all the way they are able to learn in class. And as we are looking at it, this COVID has also affected, more than 1.5 billion children, the school closure. And so imagine what about 1.5 billion children are, facing right now at home with parents who are abusive for those in those kind of community, or those who are very vulnerable. And so just to conclude, this slide, what will you do to support your kids? And I like the fact that Wendy mentioned that we must start with ourselves if we want to be there for our students. So we need to start. All what the other speakers have spoken about are things we need to first, do, so that we can be able to support our kids. And also we need to begin to think, how do we, if you have, I like the fact that Temla, you mentioned that if you have your kids' contacts, call on them. Some of them, what they are facing at home, if only they can just receive a call from their teacher, maybe they will even feel better. They're able to talk to you and then share the way they feel. So that's one thing you can do. Call their parents, talk to your kids. If you have access to organizations that are doing food support, many of these kids also, they need food support at this time. You could even start with children in your community. It doesn't even have to be kids, your own students. You can start with the kids in your community. So for example, one of the things so the Waste for Meal is trying to do right now. Waste for Meal is the social enterprise that I'm trying to work on to provide school meals for kids. So what we're trying to do is by this weekend, provide free meals at this time for kids. So even if you don't have so much, there are so many organizations doing this thing. Why don't you reach out to them and say, okay, this is what you can do for my community, and then possibly you can always get people to help them. And you can also try to raise. Coyote talked about act of kindness, trying to raise funds for your kids, donate. And also one thing I also want to say now is that for your children, for example, if you have so much, I heard of a story recently where some kids had to go break their piggy bank just to bring out the money and then help feed some other families. So if you are from such family where you still have enough and then your kids have access, this is the time where you can get to teach your kids how to help others and then, practice empathy, teach them about empathy. And so they can also do this to help the children in their community. So the truth is that as educators, the kids you need to teach in class, once something goes wrong with them, it becomes very difficult for you to teach these kids in class. So you need to pay attention to their nutritional well-being, child protection, and every other thing that affects their overall health. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you so much. I know you, I mean, when it comes to child protection and nutrition, it's a topic you never, run out of words for. So what I'm going to do now is, Coyote, I asked a question earlier. I think it will be, would you be willing to, provide a response to that now?
Yeah,
And
of
then
course.
just before you do, considering the number of participants we have, I think I'm going to open the audio. So if you have a question, you can just ask directly. So, Kayode, please go on.
Okay, yeah, at least I'm not running at this time.
Yeah.
All right, so the question, audio.
Go ahead, please.
Build themselves up for those times that we are in. I'd like to just quickly say something that this time that we are in, I mean, it's not like I'm trying to be pessimistic or trying to be negative. I'm very, very hopeful. And as a good Christian, I mean, I'm praying a whole lot about this, that this ends soon. But the truth is realistic. I mean, to be realistic is not something that, I mean, will definitely end soon. And if it ends soon, it is not something, I mean, the world will definitely change. I mean, learning will change. So how are we as teachers going to prepare ourselves, I mean, to continue to stay relevant? I think one word for it really is actually to be equipped to actually engage in digital learning. That's the way forward. I mean, that's the only way that we can think of that is humanly possible right now to do, is to get equipped in digital learning. How many tools do you know how to use? How many can you facilitate learning without being in the same physical location as the learner? You need to start asking yourself those questions. Are you able to ensure that learning takes place even if the student is not in the room where you are currently? So you need to start looking for how you can upskill yourself. And the beautiful part of it is that most of those things that you can, I mean, most of the resources that you can use, how you can build yourself are actually available for you online for free. I've gone through YouTube through the past week because we're working on a program next week for School Inca, and I saw a lot of amazing resources uploaded for free where we can learn about how to use digital tools to actually equip students. The truth is the new competition for schools now after COVID, even from now on, is if your school cannot actually engage in digital learning, you might actually go out of the market. So for schools to remain competitive, they need teachers who are able to actually drive digital learning. And if this is the case, if you want to be a teacher that will be sought after, that will be hired, you need to be able to drive digital learning. So for every innovation in education, we already know that teachers are at the heart of that model that is working. So let's get ourselves skilled up in tech skills and digital learning, and then we'll be good and we'll be able to thrive. And also, one more thing before I go, teachers need to start rethinking how they can affect the system generally. I've seen a lot of teachers starting to actually build up websites that can offer learning to students, websites that will even be powered without internet service. So teachers need to start thinking out of the box, because only us or only we together can solve this challenge. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you very much for that. So I think what so now if you have a question whatsoever, please indicate by show of hand, and then I will unmute you. Then you can ask your question, please. While we wait for people to indicate, I would just like to note and thank everybody who are here today. I know this is actually the very first one we're doing, and it might not have gone exactly as much as you might have anticipated. So now I'm going to actually be sharing a poll with us. So please, just to help us when we plan the very next one, you should see a poll right coming up on your screen now. Please try and fill it as honestly as possible. this will definitely help us to improve. And then I also like to let you know that for next week it's going to be, I mean, 4 weekly weekly series for the first edition that we're doing. So for next week we already have a speaker lineup, and I'm going to share his profile with you very shortly. I think it's someone. Now, what we have done today is to look at, preparing our mind, getting our mindset ready for what is, I mean, happening, and then rethinking our situation, rethinking the moment. Now, by from next week on, we start delving really. I know a lot of us, when I read our expectations, wanted to know, okay, so how can we break the divide between the high-end schools and the low-cost schools? A lot of low-cost schools right now are not online because they either lack the resources, they lack the access in terms of technology or internet, and a lot of or the teachers are not trained well enough. I know that these are some of the things that we're expecting, and we're definitely going to start going into that. So I'm going to just introduce you to our guest speaker for next week. His name is Nick Canning. He's the founder and CEO of Kizazi, and he has worked. He's an expert in school. Model schools, like transforming local schools, underserved schools, and then transforming them into model schools. So it's going to be on call with us next week. So I'm hoping we'll make it a date. But as much as possible, I know that. So just try and fill that form so that it can help us to plan better. And so, do we have any question? Anybody with any question? Okay, I'm not seeing any hand yet. So does that mean we're good? Okay, so I'm going to call on Miss Temia Shaw to give us a final comment before we wrap up. We'll call it today. Mr. Mlaya, are you there? Mr. Mlaya?
Yes, I'm
Yeah.
here.
Yes, please.
Okay, so on the last note, I will just remind us that there are different information out there, and we should just be selective. Two reasons why people seek for information: because they want certainty, and the truth is corona just brought it home to us. But the truth is, we have always known that life is not certain. Nothing is certain. The fact that you go out in the morning does not mean you're really going to come back in the night, and this corona has just made it more glaring and all of that. So let us not run after I want to know what's going on, I want to know what's going on, and then we keep on getting a lot of negative news. Limit your news time, limit your social media time at the same time, and be careful of the information that comes in, because they increase worries. And it is okay not to know. It is not okay not to be well. And so stay well and stay safe. God be with you. Yeah.
Thank
That's
you
all.
very much. Thank you very
You're
much.
welcome.
Falashade, any final words? Falashade, are you there?
Okay, yes, I am. All right, so I just want to say that thank you all for attending, and just remember that this is the most important time when you need to pay more attention to your nutrition, your health. And like I used to say, once your health is affected, even have all the best idea you want to give to your kids, have all the best plan of what you want to achieve in life. Once you lose your health, there is nothing that you can do to achieve all those dreams. So this is the right time, and then your nutrition is the major thing that you need to build, a better health. And so we've always been saying it, but then I think COVID has also brought it out, the importance of investing or making your nutrition a priority at this time. And so I just want to advise that even if you don't have much, try and improve your nutrition knowledge and learn how you can manage the little you have to give you the best nutrition that can improve your health at this time. And that's the only way you can also help your children or everybody around you to also live well. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much. Thank you, everyone. Still, I've not seen anyone who seemed interested in asking a question or making a comment. So thank you so much, everyone, for joining us today. We definitely, from your feedback, we try to improve on our approach. And if you do have any questions or you have topics that you like us to approach, please do send it to our email. It's right there on the screen for you. Thank you so much for joining us today. We truly appreciate you. Without you, this wouldn't have been possible. We couldn't definitely be talking to ourselves. So please, if you think that this is something that is needed right now, please kindly invite. I mean, not, let other people know. Invite your friends. This webinar is not just for teachers; it's for teachers, parents, school administrators. At some point, we'll also be looking at actual technology tools, learning management platforms that you can make use of that are cheap and free and user friendly that you can use with with minimal internet connection. We're going to be looking at some of that later on during the sessions. So please help us spread this, and then don't forget to join us next week. If you have any comments or you have any feedback for us that might help us, please kindly drop it in either in the chat box right now, or you can send it to us via email. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining us, and have a blessed night.